How should companies think about redesigning their office for the future?
The number one thing, design is very important. Design influences behavior.
Robert Wall is a trailblazing leader. As Group CEO of JEB, he's not just driving innovation in acoustic partitions and office furniture.
He's also redefining sustainable, human-centric workplaces globally. His vision is all about creating environments where people thrive. Under his guidance, JEB is setting new benchmarks in the industry, where quality and creativity meet sustainability.
My purpose is to do everything to the best of my ability and to do it with really good intentions.
How does somebody know whether they're doing something to their best ability or with their best intention?
When you have a feedback loop where when you do your best, something positive happens, and then when you start refining that and saying doing your best and doing it with good intentions, you get enjoyment as well as a good outcome.
You're now running a 250 people company with 4 regional offices. What problems are you guys trying to solve?
Someone once said to me, aim for the moon, and even if I don't make it, I might end up amongst the stars. 4.5 years ago, I got stuck. I made it my mission to spread positivity and help 1 million people to think differently. If you also believe that our world needs more positive energy, please join us on the journey. I'm Aaron Pang, and this is a Transformative Purpose.
Rob, welcome to Transformative Purpose podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Thanks. First podcast, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, welcome. It's first to everything.
Yep, absolutely. I'm a big believer in diving headfirst into new experiences. So I think this is a good one.
Yeah. I can't wait to see and to hear what comes out of the conversation. So this is a purpose podcast. I'm going to kick off our conversation by asking you, what is Rob's purpose?
Actually, I saw this on the questions, and it's quite a difficult thing, I think, for anyone to actually say, what is my purpose? And I think, I guess my purpose is to do everything to the best of my ability, and to do it with really good intentions. So I think that was what I tried to distill. And I think it flows into a lot of different things in your life. If you do everything to the best of your ability, it means that you're making an effort, you're trying really hard, and if you do it with good intention, then ultimately doing things well and doing things for good with good intentions should mean that you're going to get a positive outcome.
Mm-hmm. How does somebody know whether they're doing something to their best ability or with their best intention? Because sometimes life doesn't happen your way. Sometimes you might be projecting outwards. You're trying to do everything with good intention, but you're not reaping the reward and the benefits.
I guess you need to be reflective. I think if you're accountable to yourself and you're accountable to others, you can reflect on your experiences and what you've done and ask yourself the question, have I done that to the best of my ability? And I think it's like anything that you keep honing that and refining it, and the asking the question often enough means that you're going to be more focused on it, and then I guess it then becomes part of your DNA. And I think as a kid, growing up, I had a pretty strong mother, and she demanded the best, and she was very competitive, and she was constantly reminded you of were you doing your best, and often would pull up her own report cards and say I never got a B and stuff like that. So I think obviously your parents are definitely have influences on your life. They're the first big influence on your life, and then you work out your own way and you work out what starts to work for you. And I think that when you have a feedback loop where when you do your best, something positive happens. And then when you start refining that and saying doing your best and doing it with good intentions, you get enjoyment as well as maybe, a good outcome. You start to just, I guess, get better at, embodying that. And so it helps you to do things like sports, it helps you in academics, it helps you in, I think, your personal interactions. If you're really just focused on trying to do things as well as you can, it helps you to do better at life, I think.
Grew up in Perth. How did you end up in Asia?
Yeah, good question. So growing up in Perth, I had a great upbringing. Went to a good school, had good family. I've got 2 younger brothers. Parents, remained married. They had a good relationship for the most part. They were good parents. So I definitely had a blessed life. I think, though, as I got older, I could get a sense of the fact that Perth was not a big place and that there was something more. It wasn't like a question where it was actually very succinct and I knew what that question was. It was more like a feeling rather than something, where, someone was speaking to me. So when I finished university, I went and did commerce at university, and I did accounting, finance, and business law. One of the things that I did do at university was I intentionally chose a topic which was an elective that meant that I couldn't do another elective, so then I couldn't actually get a job in an accounting firm because I didn't want to by default end up in an accounting firm and doing what a lot of other people who graduated from my university did. So I kind of intentionally sabotaged my future for the better.
Interesting.
So I did not do accounting information systems, and I did a topic called entrepreneurship. And little did I know that would end up being, I guess, what I was going to do. So when I did that topic, entrepreneurship, you had to write a business plan, you had to create a product. And I had my surfboard stolen off the roof of my car. I grew up surfing, and we went down south to a place called Margaret River, which is a well-known wine growing area and good surfing area.
Spent a lot of time there.
And my surfboard got stolen off the roof of the car, and I was always had that MacGyver mindset, and I kind of had an idea of, if only you could have a lockable roof rack. And this was before that Swedish company Thule came out and was making all of those lockable, suitcase roof racks and ski roof racks and stuff. So I designed and created this lockable roof rack and wrote a business plan, and that was part of my entrepreneurship elective at university. That also stopped me from doing accounting information systems. That stopped me from becoming an accountant, which helped to drive me, I guess, in the direction that I ended up going in. So that's a long explanation for when I graduated from university. I'd been working in the construction industry, since I was a teenager on school holidays and stuff, and had a pretty decent income working in construction and working with a landscape architect. So I didn't really need to get a job. I was financially independent already. So I didn't have to go and take a job just because I needed to have some income. And then I met a gentleman. His name was John Edward Britton, and he'd started a business in Asia. It was a pure startup. And so John Edward Britton is JEB. And he asked me if I wanted to go to Singapore to take a locally produced West Australian product. It was a product called Thermalite, which was an aerated concrete block, which was a new type of lightweight construction. And he'd gotten the agency for that product. And I went up as a almost 21-year-old, pretty fresh graduate, and took that lightweight concrete block to Singapore. And that was my journey. That was how I started off. Started off working for, the company was called Wingara at the time, Wingara Proprietary Limited. And I was like this young kid. I was working in an industrial area in Singapore. We had the distribution rights, and we were working through a local Singaporean agent that sold all sorts of like ceramic tiles and ceramic bricks and clay tiles and all these sorts of things, and they were the guys that were out there doing the transactions, and my job was to teach them and the industry, the Construction Industry Training Council, about new lightweight building technologies, and to teach people how to lay these new big blocks, which were, I think by memory, they were about 20% of the weight of a typical brick construction. So lightweight concrete blocks reduce the overall weight of the building, which reduce the need for, the structure to be, basically able to hold up that building, which reduced cost. Sustainability wasn't a big deal at the time. So, yeah, I was responsible for selling that lightweight concrete block.
How easy was it to sell this new block to the industry?
It's a long time ago now. So I'm 52. So it was like 31, 32 years ago. At the time, I guess, we were just talking about introverts, extroverts. I guess maybe I was an extrovert at the time, and I felt comfortable talking about it. I'd used that particular product on construction projects when I was working in Perth. So I was familiar with the material, and I could understand from a physics point of view, less weight, less structure. So I think I was able to communicate that in a way that was clear. Fortunately, Singapore has 4 official languages, and English is one of them. So communicating it in a foreign environment was not a big deal there. The route I took to market was to go to the Construction Industry Training Council, which was a government organisation that was about teaching the workers there and the industry about new types of construction. So that was one way we went to market. And then, there was a little bit of, banging your head against a brick wall, sorry for the pun. But eventually there was a company that was quite interested in that product. And it was the Inland Revenue Department of Singapore, which is obviously that's the tax department of Singapore, and they were building a new tower, and we ended up getting it specified with the architect. Won the project. It was a significant project for the factory in Australia at the time. A company called BGC, it was Buckridge Group of Companies, and I think they won the Australian Export Award because it was a few hundred containers of these blocks, and subsequently that caught a lot of attention, in the industry. And then a large Singaporean developer actually went and approached the factory and said, "Look, you don't need to sell it through this distributor. I'm a developer. I build HDB housing in Singapore. I'll take all of your production." So I knew that conversation was going on at the time. And the other part of this startup business, which was interior partitioning, we just won a project for Motorola. So as one opportunity, it burned very bright for a short period of time as that was coming off, as this developer was basically cutting our grass. Another opportunity was opening up, and it was with Motorola. They were building 2 buildings. It was the Motorola Innovation Centre and the Motorola Excellence Centre, and we were supplying and installing a demountable office partition system. And that was what took me down that path at the time. And again, working for this company, Wingara, we had a distribution partner, which was an office furniture company that had some pretty famous brands that maybe some of the listeners would be familiar with, like Herman Miller, Vitra. They did, it was a very similar business to what JEB Group is now. They were our sales agent, and I was effectively the guy who was helping them and the technical, let's say, the principle of the product. And but at the time, my job was to go and build this project for Motorola as a project manager. So that was my journey into the acoustic office partition world. And that's really where it kicked off. So that was Singapore in 1993. When I arrived, I was doing the Thermalite lightweight concrete blocks, and in 1994, early 94, which is when I started project managing that Motorola project, went on to do multiple other acoustic demountable partition projects in Singapore. And then in 1996, I moved to Hong Kong and opened the what was to become the JEB office in Hong Kong.
Whenever you were given new opportunity, how did you go about pursuing them?
I guess it's a good question. I guess probably coming back to what my purpose was, just trying to do my best. I think I've got a reasonably strong work ethic, so I think all these things start to come together, from pieces of your childhood. So I was a competitive swimmer, and there are no shortcuts in swimming. Like if there's no one who trains one time a week and ends up being good. It's there's definitely a measure of the more you train, the better you will get. So it's one of those sports, and I think swimming helped me with my academics, and try hard, train more, get better results, try hard, study hard, get better results. So, that just sort of gets ingrained. And then, you approach things with that work hard, do your best mentality, so that, and then again, I guess I was young, I was brave, I wasn't afraid to try anything new, and to learn about something that was new and unfamiliar, to be curious. And I think that I've tried to maintain that curiosity as I've gotten older as well.
Let's talk about JEB, the
Okay.
company. You're now running a 250 people company with, last time I checked, with 4 regional offices. What problems are you guys trying to solve?
There's many problems that we're trying to solve. I think right now, just generally, in business, just the global economy, I think it's a challenge. There's no easy dollars. If I can just go back, and talk about how I started off, and there's obviously, I think there's elements of luck in everyone's life, and falling into this very niche industry of office partitioning and acoustic office partitioning, I think that was luck. Because when you find yourself in a niche, and there isn't a lot of competition, and you're one of one or one of two or one of three, as opposed to being one of 100 or one of 50, it enables you to have a bit of breathing space. So we were, I guess, at the time in Asia, we were one of the first. So that enabled us to build a brand and to build a platform, and to subsequently, I guess, grow our business, and for our business to grow geographically with our customers and with our clients. So, I went to Hong Kong, and we still had that distribution partner at the time, a company called Pacific Decor. They expanded into Thailand. We expanded into Thailand with them. They expanded into China. We expanded into China with them. And subsequently, we ended up going out independently on our own, and their business shut down, and then we went to market directly. Having that niche product, as I mentioned, really, I guess it was a stroke of luck, and it was falling into an industry where we didn't have a lot of competition at the time. We've got a lot more competition now. There was a lot more barriers to entry when we started out, and I think like anything now, if you're doing anything related to manufacturing, there's the barriers to entry are much less, as manufacturing costs come down, and how do we end up at 250 people? We've got 5 offices, 3 in China, actually 6, Hong Kong, Singapore, and KL. Having that niche enabled us to sort of have that, to build a platform, to build a brand. And then from there, that platform enabled us to reach a lot of customers and the people that we wanted to connect with in order to expand our reach and to sell more product. And then it was about asking, we're already talking to these people and we're already talking to them about acoustic partitioning. And then, what else could we possibly bring into the mix? And so that we brought in architectural products like acoustic materials. We're one of the first companies to really introduce bamboo flooring to the market, which was sustainable at the time. And we were already sort of thinking about that sustainable angle. And, then we introduced furniture as a furniture arm into the business as well.
Can I ask you a question on acoustic partitions?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, I'm not an expert, but I was wondering if you can educate me and the audience about,
Yeah.
Let's say someone is watching this episode right now and they're trying to renovate their office.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that they should consider when thinking about choosing the right partition for the office?
I think this environment is actually a very good example to use. So we're in a recording studio right now. If we weren't in a properly acoustically treated space, then this whole experience and you and me talking and the audience and how much feedback and potential noise coming from outside the room would really interfere with what we're doing. So I think on the acoustic partitioning side, and why we exist, is that quiet spaces are necessary and acoustically private spaces are necessary, whether that is you having a conversation with someone that happens to be private that you might not want to share with somebody outside, hiring someone, potentially firing someone, having a difficult conversation. You certainly don't want that conversation to be shared. More and more so, we've got video conferencing and audio, which means audio visual equipment that are coming into the office space as well. Audio visual sound is very different from the spoken word, and it tends to penetrate surfaces differently to the human voice. So again, that's about trying to isolate noise and isolate the acoustics from other spaces and impacting I guess the experience of other people, whether that is them not wanting to hear a private conversation, them not wanting to hear a blaring audio visual presentation that might be happening in a conference room or a meeting room, because they might need some quiet, they might need peace and quiet. I mean, there's more and more so, wellness is coming into the office environment, and there is a focus on what is wellness, right? So, and acoustics is a part of wellness. I was just in a meeting yesterday and for a new project, and the wellness criteria around acoustics is actually pushing the acoustic isolation up even greater than what we've experienced before. So it's interesting that I guess that psychological component is starting to come in. So, I'm rambling a bit, but acoustics is very important for your office. And now that, we've got these terminologies around such as wellness, that's also defining, what the office environment needs to do and how it needs to perform. And acoustics is one of those things, acoustic separation.
Do we already have a definition around what is wellness acoustic, or is that being developed at the moment?
There isn't a specific definition around wellness acoustic, but acoustics is measured in decibels or sound transmission. So, you might have a wellness consultant who's giving you a specific sound transmission level or a minimum sound transmission rating that needs to be achieved between rooms or between, from a meeting room or a conference room to the outside of that space. So that's, for example, I'm just giving you a Wikipedia version here. A sound transmission class of less than 30 would be, pretty poor acoustics between room to room. And once you get up, 40 plus STC, which is the measurement, you're getting into better acoustics and a better environment. And then once you start to get close to 50, you're really, stopping any sound transmitting between rooms. So there's no real sort of definition what is wellness acoustic, but there is, I guess, there's a general general acceptance that above 40 is what most offices should be looking to achieve in terms of STC, which is sound transmission class.
Okay.
I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole in acoustics. It's a bit of a dark art, but yeah.
I want to ask you a question around office space. So we went from full cubicles, call center oriented offices, to companies using open plan offices, with the assumption thinking that having an open plan office layout would drive more face-to-face interaction, people will communicate more. I was just looking at a study from Harvard Business Study this morning because I'm writing in my next book. Yeah. And the study also alluded that was a myth. They've done studies on one Fortune 500 company. They completely knocked down all the walls in one of their floors, and they realized that the face-to-face interaction dropped about, I think, 67 or 70%. So I know you speak to a lot of clients, and then we just had COVID. Some companies still have this hybrid policy. I also heard from the younger generation, they want to have more flexibility and agility in terms of working hours and where they want to work. Yeah. How should companies think about redesigning their office for the future?
Wow. Okay, that's again, another rabbit hole question. I think the first thing is to accept that, that type of study, and, when you really get into the science around, what is a study, if you're really getting into scientific studies, you got to do double blind, studies and all this kind of stuff. And so I think that these one-off studies where you say one company tore down all their walls and that, decreased human interaction, I think it's very dangerous to start looking at those things. I think that what's really important is that people need to respect the number one thing that they need to respect is that design is very important. Okay, so design influences behavior, and what kind of behaviors and what kind of outcomes are you trying to drive, right? So if you're trying to drive more human interaction, and let's say we were just talking about the human experience, which is connection. If you're trying to drive more connection, probably isolating people, into rooms or high cubicles is maybe not the best way, but I don't think that there really is enough study and real data around it. I mean, I'd say, sorry, there's a lot of study and there's a lot of data, how accurate it is, because it's so hard to compare one piece of data to another. But one thing that is for sure is that work life is changing, and it's going to continue to change. So if we're talking about like what should companies expect that it will continue to change, and it will always change, because as humans we're evolving in terms of our essential human experience. And what's driving that change? Well, technology is one of them. So, before, like, let's take a desk, for example. Before, if you wanted to have an old school computer on your desk, you had a monitor that was, 400 to 600 millimeters deep. So you needed a desk that was at least that deep, and then a little bit of space in front of it to have a keyboard, right? Mm-hmm. And then the technology changed, and people work off laptops, or you've got very thin screens. So that meant the necessity in terms of your space to be able to work on a computer changed, right? So that's one thing, is that technology drives innovation and change. We were talking before about sound isolation and acoustic separation between spaces. COVID drove really the development of video conferencing, personal video conferencing, like Zoom mm-hmm. and Teams and Google Meet and all of these tools, which are now, things that we just use them automatically, right? So that has also been a big driver of the change. Okay, so you've got a situation, an external situation, a driver like a pandemic, which drives the technology, and then the technology then comes into the workplace, which is video conferencing. More video conferencing means more audio visual. More audio visual means like a higher acoustic separation requirement, which then drives my business to create better acoustic products to deal with that technology. So it's definitely not, there's no panacea for, what is the ultimate office environment. I think it's a little bit of a horses for courses, but I think also there needs to be a little bit of, just bring it back. What behaviors do we want, and how is design and how is the environment going to influence those behaviors? Because ultimately, a good culture is driven by good behavior, right? So it's like, it sort of comes back down to, what's our corporate culture, and what are our behaviors, and what's going to drive, the right outcomes that's going to make us perform at our optimum level.
You touch on swimming being a very big part of your character. And you also touch on with swimming, we can't take any shortcuts. So in the context of office design, what shortcuts would you advise people not to take when we're thinking about, designing a workplace for their employees? Or maybe what shortcuts have you seen people took and it has cost them?
I think this sort of, takes us in the direction towards something which is very close to my heart right now, which is sustainability. And the uprising of China, and China being so capable with manufacturing, and most of the globe using China as their factory, and as everyone sort of like basically outsource their manufacturing to China. It's created a culture where things have become deflationary. I think I was reading something where a pair of socks in 1990 cost you $3.50 US or something like that, and then like today, a pair of socks costs you $3.50, right? So I mean, like, that doesn't make sense, with inflation, right? Like, if that's effectively deflation. So what does that mean? It just means that we've become very comfortable with throwing things away. Whereas if a pair of socks cost you in 1993 $50, that cost a lot more in real terms back then. So maybe if those socks had a hole in them, you'd repair them.
Yeah, and you also think about it before you purchase them.
Yeah, and you'd keep them. And I remember, growing up, you'd never throw away a washing machine. There was like a whole industry where you'd have the washing machine repairman and stuff like that. So I think society has become very comfortable with throwing things away because it's just as easy. It's easier to buy something new than it is to get it repaired. And people have just become, really comfortable and also desiring things that are shiny and new. So coming back to shortcuts, I think that the office, like many things, whether it's fashion or other consumer goods, it has just become an environment where people say, I'm going to buy new, I'm going to buy new, I'm going to buy new. And often it's, I'm going to buy new and I'm going to buy cheap. So that is a shortcut, right? If you're just thinking, I want something new and I want something cheap and I want it to be shiny and to come in a box and unpack a box like a Christmas present, that's a shortcut because you're not actually thinking about, you're not buying for the future, you're buying for right now. And that's really where I think that we need to change people's mindset around, what they're doing in terms of purchasing for their office. Like anything in life, I think you're better off purchase once, spend more money on that thing, purchase something that's of better quality and keep it and maintain it. And by doing that, we're going to reduce, it's the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. We are going to reduce our consumption. If we don't want it anymore, but it's high quality, someone else might take it. You might be able to donate it so it can be reused. And then I think the other part of it is just, which is coming more into people's sort of mindset anyway, the concept of recycling. But yeah, I would say shortcuts when you're building an office or which requires you to purchase things is, don't just think about, what's going to cost me less right now. Think about, okay, if I'm going to buy something cheap and then replace it again in 3 years' time, and again in another 3 years, and again in another 3 years, am I better off buying something that costs double that I'm not going to have to replace 3 or 4 times over the next 10 years? So I think driving that kind of behavior is something that we are trying to do, and we're trying to communicate to the market, as well as, to deal with the things that people don't necessarily want anymore. So
do you think there's also an element of misalignment of interest as well? Like, say for example, if I'm a general manager of a company today, I will only care about how my office is going to look like in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah. I mean, it's misalignment of interests, and it's also the priorities that are often being set at C-suite level are not coming down to the staff who are in charge of things like purchasing, or they have different KPIs. So they might have, their KPIs might be driven around get the best price, as opposed to buy the most sustainable thing that that will last the longest. So it's an age-old problem. What gets discussed in at the boardroom table takes a long time to filter down into the actual corporate doing level. But we've got to overcome that. I mean, the thing about sustainability is, if you actually look at what does sustain mean, it means to keep going. So sustainability, as it relates to us as human beings, it's, if we are not sustainable as humans and in our behavior, like, if you're not sustainable, you're going to end. So, I mean, that's really what sustainability is about. It's like enabling us to keep going, like to sustain. So I think most people, it's just become a buzzword, and they're not actually thinking about what does it mean in the root of the word.
Yeah, because I think for most people, it's not tangible, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you're a kid, you think you're bulletproof. Death is far less tangible, and it's far less real
Until you have health scare.
Until you have a health scare, or until you turn 40. Even for me, that has been, like being aware of your own mortality. My dad died young, unfortunately, when he was in his early 60s. And, when I turned 40, I was actually, and my grandfather also died at the same age. So when I turned 40, I suddenly became very aware of, my mortality. It was like, if my dad died at 62 and his dad died at 62, that means I've only got 22 years left on the planet. What am I going to start doing about how am I going to start living my life? And then that relates to sustainability as well. It's kind of this global warming issue that's really becoming more and more prevalent. Like, you look at, I was at a conference last year, and they were saying that Hong Kong had more days over 35 degrees Celsius in July last year than they'd ever had in a year before. So in 1 month, there was more days over 35 degrees. They'd broken the record for an entire year. So I think that as these things become, more and more tangible, and unfortunately more and more uncomfortable, we're going to start hopefully making better decisions.
And hopefully not too late, to your point.
Hopefully not too late. I am an optimist, but we just need to be aware, and also, again, just coming back to something that's, again, the purpose question. Like, if we're really going to align our purposes, which is the human connection, we're put on this earth to connect, and the human experience is enriched through connection, through positive connections. We have to connect, like, across the planet, across the globe, and all come together to solve this problem. And we've got the tools, we've got the technology now. The video conferencing and everything means that you can put 1,000 people on a VC and get 1,000 minds all working on one problem, which is better than one mind. So, yeah, I'm positive, but it really comes back to, we've got to start setting these intentions, and to, incentivizing the intention as well. So that comes back to what you said about misalignment. If the procurement guy is being incentivized to get a cheaper option as opposed to a more sustainable option, then he's not going to make the right decision unless his core purpose overrides, let's say, the KPIs that are being set by his organization. So changing the incentives is going to help.
I have a story to share here.
Okay.
So when I was leading a startup, my team was given $100,000 Hong Kong to move our offices. So that was the ceiling, that was the threshold. So in order for us to make sure we stay within that budget, we had to order a lot of things from Taobao.
Yep.
And when we couldn't make that budget, basically me and my entire team, we just stayed behind after hours. So we just had to repaint the new office ourselves.
Yep.
So we kind of want to share the story, and I think to a very certain extent, I think it resonates with what you just said about, aligning our interests at the top, at the board, but also have the courage to stick to your purpose and do the things that are right for the community and for the rest of the world.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. So that's a very good example. And a couple of years ago, we started a division of our business. We called it Sustainable Office Solutions, or SOS, because it was kind of like an SOS to the world that we got to do something. Thought the acronym was appropriate, and that business was really about focusing on what companies were leaving behind when they moved office or renovated, which had almost, there was no thought or focus or attention around it. And we were shining a spotlight on the fact that every time a company moves, they never look in the rear vision mirror, and they're leaving behind often what is good quality product that could still be reused, right? So we came up with a solution, and one of the parts of the solution was to donate these items, or or to help, whether it's NGOs or SMEs, or work with secondhand furniture companies, so that these items could continue to live and not be thrown into landfill.
I read that your first SOS project was done with EY. And your team came up with a 5-step framework with less than 4 weeks ago.
we did, and it just goes to show, when it's like cramming for an exam, you get it done, right? And so we kind of crammed for an exam. We were very late into the piece, and had a goal which was to save 1 chair, and we ended up saving more than 50 tons of items from going into the landfill. And that kind of was the start of SOS and saying, right, this is something that we can do. It's possible. Let's build it into our organization. And we're very fortunate that, that we've got such great people. And I think that that's part of, the JEB story, right? Even for me, and how things have happened, and, the luck of falling into like a niche industry and being able to be one of one or one of two in building a business and a platform. I just had really good people around me. I had a early business partner, Terry Jordan, who's still a partner, who was a lot older and just offered great mentorship, had great self-control. He was, in some ways, was a bit like my dad in the way he just carried himself. And then...
Have you ever told him?
Yeah, I hope so. Maybe I'll send him this podcast so he can listen. But he...
Hope he doesn't get offended.
Yeah, he wasn't so much like a dad, but in terms of like a mentor, and the way he carried himself, and he just never really lost his cool. He was just always and very meticulous and focused on always doing the right thing. And then and I've had subsequently one of my great friends who's come into the business, Paul Dingley, who's brought in something incredible. He's always positive, always upbeat. The man that everyone wants to be like in the room. So and then the people in our organization that we've just been so fortunate to connect with, and for them to choose us as a business that they want to work for, have all been part of what's possible and what's enabled things to become possible. So SOS would not have been able to happen if we hadn't have had like a few passionate people internally who said, yeah, we'll give this a shot. I mean, it wasn't even part of their job scope. I mean, they didn't, and none of them said, you got to pay me more. They just said, yeah, we'll give this a shot. And then it's turned into something, and it's turned into something quite amazing and fabulous, and made me feel better about going to work every day, that we're contributing to making the industry a better industry. Speaking of which, we actually have Jen sitting in the background, who is one of your C-suite leaders, right? Yep. How do you lead your team, and how do you show up as a leader? So you recently invited me to one of your parties, and I swear to God, I must have seen like 500 people at your party. Everyone was having a great time. I met a lot of your partners and a lot of your staff members. How did you build that culture? I guess it comes back to that purpose, and then also our culture is part of our mission statement: lead, serve, innovate, create. it's like everything in my life. I'm just trying to simplify. And so with the culture piece, I think, like lead for me, like we didn't really write it down and create a sentence so it would become too literal. That, with these words, lead, serve, innovate, and create, it was supposed to be 4 powerful words that could resonate with everyone initially, and then Jen has turned it into something that's far more eloquent in terms of what it means. But for me, when you were talking about the culture, so the lead piece is really, you have to lead yourself before you can lead others, right? So you want to be a role model. You want to show up at work and, take care of yourself from a health point of view, so that you can demonstrate that you're taking care of yourself outside at work as well as just turning up. So be good to yourself. That enables you to be good to others, in principle. The serve and the innovate, the lead and the serve is good to yourself, good to others. The innovate is really just to not find obstacles as something that nothing's insurmountable. Like, just try and innovate. Look at things from a perspective of, I might not be able to figure it out today, but I will be able to figure it out. That kind of, I will learn, I'll figure it out, I'll continue to try. And then the create is like, someone said to me, and I think it's a really good saying, is that we're all responsible for the atmosphere that we create. Mm-hmm. And I think creation is a really important thing. So create an atmosphere, be responsible for the atmosphere that you create. You can, if you turn up in a bad mood, and then you're going to create a bad atmosphere. Whereas if you turn up positive and upbeat and curious, I think that atmosphere hopefully is going to be something that, is infectious, and then that infection is going to create a culture, because more people are going to get infected with that culture and turning up with good atmosphere, being curious, being open-minded, being resilient, wanting to create, and try your best. Do it with good intention. I think it's quite simple. People get they overcomplicate things. And I think that if you just really try your best to create that good atmosphere, do it with a good intention. Make sure that, you try and have that mindset of like, every interaction, I'm hopefully going to leave the situation better than when I entered it, right? So exit something better than when you entered it.
And your advice on finding the right people? How do you hire?
We get better at it. It's not there's no, I'd say, there's no real rule of thumb. I think what's important and what I've learnt is that never be impressed by someone's skills. Right. So like, skills can be learnt, they can be taught. It's all about attitude. So if someone comes in and you really feel a good attitude and a positive mindset, and if they're a little bit, underdone in terms of skills, you can teach them. I think, we want good people before we want high performers. Good people can become high performers if they've got the right attributes. But yeah, we're getting better at it. And then again, you've got to, sort of teach people and remind them about, hire for attributes and attitude. Don't hire for skill sets. Don't get someone comes and starts overawing you about, what they can do. I think you need to actually say, that's all good. I want to know who you are, rather than, what you can do.
Yeah.
And then keep reminding people in the organization, when they're hiring, hire higher the attributes, higher the attitude.
Mm. And how do you spot these attributes and values just from a 1 hour, an hour and a half conversation? What evidence would you be looking for?
I think you get a sense through your gut feel, I think. And I think I do. I mean, I always encourage people just to go with their instinct. I think, they talk about that gut-brain connection, and then we've got so many of these bacteria. Are we the hosts, or with the bacteria? I think that gut feeling, I think it's a real thing. I don't think it's been studied enough. I mean, there's a lot of people who talk about it, but I think the gut feel is an important one. But I think when you're interviewing something, encourage the conversation, just like what we're having now. Encourage it to flow, because then you're going to start to understand more about the person as they, reveal their true self and their true nature, rather than something that's very, let's say, scripted. If it's too scripted in your interview, someone can turn up and give you the right answers, every time.
And how do you trust that if we are empowering your team to make decisions based on their intuition, and when their rule doesn't match up with the reality, when their intuition went wrong, then what do you do as a leader?
It's like everything. I've made loads of mistakes. So yeah, you want people to. You don't want people to suddenly stop trusting their intuition. But people are going to make mistakes, right? And we all make mistakes when it comes to thinking that we know someone, or thinking that we, making assumptions, or going with our gut about who that person might be. I mean, there's so many examples in life. It happens in friendships. It happens in marriages. And hopefully you don't find out too late, right? Hopefully you can find out fairly early in the piece. I made a mistake. I thought this person was like this, or like that, and they didn't end up being either of those. So maybe that they're not a good fit for the organization. But I think as well, what's important is that if you look at an organization rather than this sort of aggregate of something that's not organic, if you think of an organization as something that's more organic, like a sort of a living organism, I think you can almost trust the organization to become, the thing that, is able to weed out, the bad actors or the bad eggs. And then you might hire someone, but other people in the organization are the ones that end up being the filter or the lens that says, right, that was a good hire or not a good hire. And then, the organization has its own antibodies and, either gets rid of them or not.
Yeah. So you've been a CEO for a long time. For your day-to-day running of the organization, what are some of the things that you must get involved? What are some of the non-negotiable things that you're obsessed with from a day-to-day operation point of view? And what do you outsource and empower people with?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I try to be as in tune to the organization as possible. I try to be, whether it's the liver or the kidney or whatever part of it is, or the gut. I try to just be as aware as possible to the health of the organization. And that's, we've got great people who can do all the processes really well. We've got a good culture. People try hard. People understand the lead, serve, innovate, create for the most part. I think most companies that work with JEB and our people know that there is a high level of service and that we're a different organization to others in the industry. So those parts of it are they're process driven and also culture driven as well. I try to be very sensitive to what's going on with our people and our leadership, and more so the leadership, because when you've had some tough moments with leadership and bad experiences, I should actually say every experience is a good experience if it teaches you something, whether it's a positive or a negative one. So I try to be far more in tune with what's going on with our people. So in terms of what I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis, that I won't let others, not let others, but the thing that I insist on getting very involved in is just making sure that leadership piece is right. And yeah, I mean, I guess I can tell you what the stuff that I'm working on right now is very much our leadership in, outside of Hong Kong. We've got some really interesting, opportunities. So let's say the, new opportunities, new directions for the business. We've got some really interesting stuff going on. I'm very involved in product design as well. And I enjoy that. I guess that comes back to that sort of that MacGyver mindset. How can I fix something and make it better? So yeah, those are the things. That's what's on my plate right now. So it's like leadership, new business opportunities, which is rolling the dice. So I think when people see or take part in a new business opportunity, they don't always work. But when you roll the dice and you're willing to roll out a prototype and willing for it to be wrong, but it could be amazing, hopefully that sort of like that willing to experiment and not being afraid to try something new, that then resonates down through the organization and hopefully into the culture. And
love this rolling dice analogy.
Yeah.
We've got a platform and a medium, and we've touched on sustainability today. And you also mentioned that everyone can take part in making our environment better. What is the one thing that you would like the audience to help with your purpose, or to help make the world more sustainable for our kids?
I think, we really just need to come together as human beings. I think there's so much division in the world right now, and people wanting to create these individual identities and siloed cultures and all this kind of stuff. And when you close your eyes, I would like to think about how does a blind person see the world? Like, when you close your eyes, ultimately we are all human, we are all fallible, and this experience is a fleeting one. If we do come together and we do connect properly and we do it, try our best, do it with good intentions, it's going to be a better experience for everyone. So I think everyone's just got to come together, do their best, and do it with best intentions.
Lovely. And we wrap up our interview with a question that I asked the guest to ask the audience. So if there is someone watching this episode right now, what is a self-reflective question that you would like to ask them?
Ask them. I guess it's what I'd like to ask the audience. I guess it's that question that everyone has is does everyone feel like me? That's really, we're all, I guess, looking out from this, from behind these eyes and thinking that we're the star in this movie that is life. But does everyone feel like me? Does everyone feel that we would be better off if we could come together and try and experience this life a little bit more united and with better intentions.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
it's been a great pleasure chatting with
Thanks,
you.
Aaron.
Learn so much about you and your company and all the great things that you guys do.
Great. No, always love talking to you, mate. You're a great conversationalist.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks.